This happened at Fish Lake National Forest in Utah. There are 3 Kintz Lakes: Upper Kintz Lake, and Lower Kintz Lake. This happened in the middle one. I am no stranger to the paranormal and unknown. I've seen many unexplained occurrences, and I'm pretty sure my house is haunted. But this is a different story. I was camping at the lake with my father and younger sister. It was less than a month ago as of writing this, so the events are still fresh in my mind. Now, we often do go camping, but usually we camp closer to home in Southern California. This campsite was a bit more secluded than we were used to. We often camped with our neighbors as well, whom I get along with. But they were not with us on this trip. After an 8-hour drive to the campsite, my sister and I were starting to argue a lot. The lake was beautiful. We saw a lot of chipmunks, squirrels, and fish, as well as some elk and deer and cows. We even spotted 2 golden eagles. The beauty of the nature there that surrounded us lulled me into a false sense of security. After a particularly nasty fight with my sister, I went off exploring in an attempt to calm myself down. I've struggled with anger issues in the past, something I'm working with my therapist to get better at. I crossed the lake angrily, unaware of my surroundings. I got to the floodgate on the other side of the lake, and I was about to head into the forest when suddenly everything felt wrong. I felt as if someone was there with me, and they didn't want me around. There were no animals or bugs in sight, which was very strange. I contemplated turning back, or at least going back to camp to get a radio, so I could call for help if I needed to. But then I remembered how mad I was at my sister, and as the fury grew again in my mind, the doubt practically disappeared. It seems my anger blinds me from any sense of dread or self-preservation. Still, as I trudged into the thickly wooded forest, I felt myself constantly checking for my throwing knives on my belt, as if somehow they'd disappeared. Eventually, as I kept walking, and the feeling got worse, I pulled out one of the knives from its place on my hip. As I gripped the hilt, I wondered how much damage such a small knife could really do. I continued going through, not letting the fear stop me. As I walked through the forest, it was dead silent. Not in the way that a silence fell over the forest, but that I was the only one making a sound since I left the shore of the lake. This, too, was concerning, but I brushed it off, saying my loud footsteps probably scared all the animals away. I came across a gross smell. I stopped in my tracks and I looked around. I could see nothing, not until I glanced down. A few inches away from my left foot was a dead squirrel. Gross, but still not out of the ordinary. I had to wonder, though, why there were no flies swarming around the dead body. I carefully stepped around it, feeling kind of sad but continuing on. About 10 minutes later, I decided to take a break. I had asthma, and it was getting hard for me to breathe. As I sat still, now completely silent, the woods were too. It was as if someone had just stopped time. I began to feel nauseous, and I thought heading back might be a good idea. I looked over at the seemingly empty forest ahead of me. I noticed a hawk feather. I thought this was really interesting, so I walked over to pick it up. And then I noticed another, and another. There were a lot of these feathers, and then there was the corpse of a hawk. Now I was starting to get really freaked out. I grabbed my knife again, and I booked it out of there. I was almost running, but not quite, because I was in a thickly forested hill. I was almost to the shoreline. I could see it, but then I heard something. The snapping of a branch. The first other sound I'd heard since entering those trees. I froze, then built up courage to turn around slowly. It may have been a deer or elk. But there, sitting on the forest floor, was this thing. I've no idea what it was, but it was dark like a shadow. Its limbs were almost undefined, but they were long and thin. It crawled on 4 legs, almost like a giant bug, but quadrupedal. It had white, almost glowing eyes. Those eyes were full of hatred. This thing was big, arms almost as long as my entire body. It seemed to have no facial features besides eyes, no nose or mouth. But it had hands with 5 fingers and filthy blood-stained claws. I ran as fast as I could. I ran out to the shore, too terrified to look back. My lungs were burning, but I didn't stop running until I got back to our campsite. Still, that thing followed me to the tree line, but I don't think it went any further. But it followed me long enough to grab my ankle, and as I yanked my foot back, my boots were splashed with blood, and I got a nasty scratch on my ankle to prove it. When I made it back, I didn't tell my dad or sister, in fear that they would not believe my story. Instead, I told them that I'd fallen. That's how I'd gotten the injury. I have no idea what I saw, but I know it wanted me dead, just like that squirrel and that hawk. I tried to research it, but I really have no idea where to start. All I know is that I'm never going back to Fish Lake National Forest ever again. Growing up, my thing had always been walking alone in the woods. I was a creative writer in school. My attention span now is far too gone to finish much writing these days. But back then, I would take a stroll through the woods to get my writing done. Just me, a pencil, and a notebook. Heck, sometimes I'd even listen to Silent Hill and Parasite Eve OSTs. Some of those tracks were pretty creepy too. Yet it never creeped me out. Being alone in the woods listening to music that could be eerie, I never did feel afraid. This single experience, however, has left me with a feeling of dread at the mere thought of going back in the woods alone. I still venture out there, but that peace of mind I used to have just isn't there anymore. I work at a call center. I have weekends off, and I was single at the time, with not too many friends. I would frequently spend my weekends hiking and camping along the Appalachian Trail. I lived only 2 hours from it, and the drive itself was usually quite relaxing too. Solo hiking and camping can be difficult, and it's not something I recommend for inexperienced hikers. Even if you follow a forecast, weather can turn unexpectedly. The rare large animal encounter can happen, and sometimes you can put yourself in a very dangerous situation when you've got no one with you. I sprained my ankle once on a trail in the nearby mountains. I was miles deep, and having gone in alone, I had to trek back, limping all the way. Not a fun experience. On a cloudy Saturday morning, I woke up early, gathering my things and venturing forth to the Appalachian Trail. A couple of hours of a drive there, I arrived. No rain at all just yet, though the sky would remain overcast for the duration of my journey. I'd planned on a one-night camping trip. I wouldn't go too deep. I had some plans the following day for my sister's baby shower, and I didn't plan on missing it. The hike in was smooth. The air that day was just the right pressure and humidity. It was an especially comfortable hike. I never would have expected what would soon transpire. I hunkered down under a poplar tree, chowing down on a Cliff Bar. Then I finished off my first bottle of water. I looked around as I enjoyed my brunch, trying to remember the names to the numerous different trees and shrubs around me. Then I thought about a meeting I'd have to come in early for on Tuesday. It was around then I saw something that made my heart lurch. A human figure at the top of a dead tree about 20 yards to my right. It was small. I could very clearly make out a small coat, pants, shoes, and hair. What in the world? I wondered, My heart raced as I picked myself up and ran over towards the tree. Surely I wasn't seeing a child stuck at the very tip-top of a tree in the Appalachian Trail, right? It was the most bizarre thing. I definitely panicked, to be honest. If this child fell from that height, they could be hurt, if they weren't already. I mean, the figure wasn't moving at all, except for their clothes blowing in the wind.
Hey, are you okay?
I called up. No response. No movement either. I gulped, my heart sinking a little farther. Now, you're probably thinking I should have called for help then. But I had a habit of leaving my phone in the car. I don't like looking at my screen too often, so on short hikes I like to leave it behind. I was only going to be out overnight, so I thought I wouldn't need it. I made a quick decision, and I began to climb. I was in decent shape, sure, but I hadn't climbed a tree since I was 12 or 13 years old? Luckily, this tree was nearly perfect for climbing. Branches all in the right places. It was only recently dead, too, so none of it felt brittle yet. I had to stop several times, but eventually, exhausted, I made it close enough to the figure to reach out and touch their shoe. I poked the bottom of one of their shoes, trying to get their attention or get a response. The shoe fell the moment my finger touched it. Underneath, there was no sock, no foot. I looked closer at the rest of the figure. There was no person inside the clothes. The coat and pants were empty, and the hair, well, that was especially weird. I reached up, nearly losing my hold on the tree, and inside the hood of the coat was in fact very real human hair, long and straight like it belonged to a young girl. But the strand I pulled wasn't attached to anything. Oddly enough, I could see flakes of skin on the end of the strands, as if the hair had been yanked from someone's head. I felt vomit rising from my stomach. Before I could react further, I heard something below me then. Footsteps, slow and heavy. Then there was a whisper just barely louder than the wind.
Come down.
The voice sounded feminine and elderly, but somehow it sounded closer to me, as if the speaker was on a nearby branch. Impossible. I was the only one up here.
Come down.
It repeated, without any change in its inflection. Obviously, that was the last thing I wanted to do. I stayed in that tree, clinging for dear life. But my muscles were getting weary, my limbs wobbly.
Come down.
It came again suddenly after about 10 minutes of silence. I was at my limit then. I tried resting myself on the branch below me, but it was thin, forcing me to press my feet and legs forward onto it to keep my back steadily against the trunk. There was no position in which I could rest. I had to get down.
Come down.
Again, I heard the whisper. The footsteps came again, too. They seemed to be just below me at the bottom of the tree. But when I looked, I saw no one. I climbed down to the next branch, my legs still wobbling. Then the next, then another, until at last I was confident I could jump down without being hurt. I took a deep breath. I remember thinking, "Go," and jumping at the same time. I hit the ground, both my knees popping, but I was fine, and I ran as quickly as I could down the trail the way I came. I didn't look back. I have no idea how I was allowed to leave. Whatever I had encountered out there felt so malevolent, evil, but I ran until I saw another person whose expression was one of confusion and startlement. I smiled, panted, and continued past. Back at my car, I called the ranger station with my phone, which had been waiting on me in the glove compartment. I reported what I'd found and where I found it. I couldn't help but think then, maybe I should have run instead of climbing that tree. But the idea of the poor child falling from it while I was gone, trying to find them help, ate at me. Now, knowing there was no child, I felt as if I had been baited. Some subconscious part of me was telling me something had laid a trap for me. Then again, why was I allowed to leave? That was the last of it. I never heard back from anyone regarding the encounter. I've never heard of a similar experience, and I've seen no news reports about a missing child. In the end, a fear of the woods now lingers with me, and I'll be staying far away from the Appalachian Trail for the time being. When I was 13, I went to visit my family in Mexico. I was having a great time getting to know about the traditions, about the legends they have in the town, and even the scary stories they had, which intrigued me the most. One day, I was out in the town with my uncle. A friend of his approached us. He invited my uncle to go night fishing with them, but my uncle said no, as he had to work that night, but he said he might go next time. That night, I was waiting for my uncle at my grandma's house. We planned on going to eat some tacos. He would be getting off around 11 at night, so by the time we went to eat and come back, it was 1 in the morning. A few minutes after we got back, someone knocked at the door. My grandma went to open it. There stood my uncle's friend, standing outside with a pale face and a look of terror. We brought him inside to calm him down. My uncle asked what was going on with him, and why he looked so pale, like he had just seen the dead. The man, in a panic, began to explain that he had gone fishing by himself out at the lake in the wilderness. But the entire night, he wasn't having any luck, so he decided to pack and head back home. He got on his bike and was following the trail that goes around the lake. And while he was looking over at the lake, he started to see a ripple on the water. He saw something preparing to come out of the lake. At first, he thought it was an iguana, but as he got closer to that side of the lake, he noticed it was bigger than that. It came out of the water on all fours, and my uncle's friend noticed that it had scales all over its body. They were very shiny, reflecting the light of the full moon. He noticed then that it had a pointed tail, like a lizard, but much shorter. And while he was getting closer to that side of the lake, the creature heard him and turned around. And then it stood up on 2 legs. He said the creature looked like it was 6 feet tall. It had these big yellow eyes and was just staring at him, following his every movement with that stare. While he passed it by, he decided to go a little faster on the bike he was on, so he could get out of there more quickly. After that story, my grandma told us that ever since she was a little girl, she had heard tales about a fisherman that made a deal with the devil, but didn't keep his side of the deal. So he was dragged into the water by the devil himself and was transformed into the creature my uncle's friend saw. They call him El Chavarin. Supposedly, he is responsible for many of the drownings at the lake and all the rivers connected to it. Back in 2005, I was living in Los Angeles. I was living a good but busy life. The night of my experience, I was driving on the 710 freeway on my way from downtown LA to Long Beach. It was wintertime, so it was already dark by then, and it was cold. Yes, it can get cold in LA. It was windy, rainy, and a bit foggy too, as I got closer to the ocean. The time was nearly 6 p.m., more or less. I was driving my brand new car with the lights on, sticking to the fast lane on the left side of the freeway. I was going downhill near a section of the freeway with trees and shrubs on the left. That's when it happened. Out of the bushes, a huge man wearing nothing but trousers came out running and charged straight at my car. In a split second, I turned the wheel to the right and barely avoided hitting what I thought was a crazy bum on drugs. Fortunately, there was no traffic, and all the lanes to my right were empty. It happened very fast. I got a good look at the man, and I realized this could not be a normal person. This quote-unquote person was big and was apparently super strong. However, his muscles were not defined. He was bulky instead. He reminded me of the Stretch Armstrong action toy I used to play with as a boy. He must have been around 6 feet tall and 230 pounds. His face wasn't normal either. His features looked crudely carved on his face, as if he was made out of clay or rock and had never been finished, with 2 empty shallow holes as eyes, a square nose with no nostrils, and a thin line for a mouth. His hair was dirty and looked as if it was completely covered with dirt and dust. The creature had a strange color, like a light greenish gray. When the creature realized I was moving to the next lane, it moved quickly and tried to grab my car with his massive hands. As crazy as it sounds, I noticed his hands had no fingernails. They were very square looking and looked extremely smooth, as if they were also modeled out of clay. I could hear the squeaky sort of sound of the creature's fingers grabbing my car from the driver's side, but I was going around 60 miles per hour, so it wasn't going to keep a hold of it. Due to the friction, the creature spun clockwise and lost its balance. Through the car mirrors, I could see with horror how the monster fell face down to the concrete, as the lights of the upcoming cars could be seen in the distance. There was a curve up ahead, and I was still going downhill, so soon enough I lost sight of the whole scene. When I considered it safe, I pulled over to the right side of the freeway. I dialed 911. I told the operator how there was a homeless nude man in the middle of the 710 freeway and gave her the exact location. She asked me for my cell phone number and said she would call back. I was expecting to hear sirens, or at least the sounds of cars crashing and honking. But nothing happened. Cars passed me by with no signs of disturbance. No screeching sounds could be heard. I couldn't see anything from there, even when I got out of my car and tried to look for any sign of trouble. When the operator called me back, she said there was nothing happening on that freeway, and no reports had been made beyond my own. Confused, I went back into my car and just decided to brush it off as some kind of crazy encounter. I continued my trip. I arrived at my girlfriend's place. She came out of her apartment, hopped in the car, and we went out for dinner. I decided against telling her about the incident. We just enjoyed our time for the night. But at one point I noticed the car was low on gas. I found a gas station to fill up at, and when I got out and closed the door, my blood went cold. There were 2 sets of gray lines marked on the side of my car, going from the front lights all the way to the back tire. The lines were marked in what seemed to be a greenish-gray mud and were still fresh. I trembled, and I asked my girlfriend to come out of the car to take a look. It was only then that I told her the whole story. She looked at the finger lines in disbelief, but she believed everything I told her about this large man that tried to grab hold of my car. The following day, I went to a car wash to get rid of the lines. Sometime later, I forgot about the incident, until I watched this movie. It was about a golem, which is a clay creature brought to life through strange rituals. It was very similar to what I saw on the road. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I'm sure there is a better explanation, but at the moment I'm convinced that's what I saw that winter night on the freeway.